One of the things I see stopping a lot of entrepreneurs, especially kind of newer entrepreneurs, or sometimes even entrepreneurs that have been in the space for a while, is this idea of niching down. They think they have to uncover what their niche is in order to move forward, in order to craft their messaging. And I don't think you do. I don't think you even need to choose a niche at all, at least not the way that you've probably been taught. Most of us have been taught to choose a category or a subcategory of a subcategory. And I think that's totally outdated, backwards, and actually causes more problems than it does good. So I'm going to break down the way that I like to teach messaging inside of our program. I like to teach niching down the way that I niche down. And I like to teach, and I'm going to show you how to niche down without having to choose a category. It's going to help you with your messaging. It's going to help you attract the right people. It's going to help you find those dream clients. It's going to help you with all of that. So if that's interesting to you, well, keep on listening.
Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Excited to have you guys here. We have a great episode lined up for you. I've noticed we haven't really done any guest episodes here in a while, and we are gearing up to bring some amazing guests to you guys. And so we have some of my best pals coming on pretty soon, and we have some new people that have never been on the podcast coming on. But I've also just enjoyed kind of recording when I wanted to record and recording when things pop into my head and doing all that stuff. And so this was another episode that just kind of popped up. Actually, this episode was inspired by conversations I've had with the students. As you guys know, because of the last week's episode, we just wrapped up our launch, which means we had a bunch of new students back in the program. And so one of the things that I like to do with my brand, and one of the things I like to do with my messaging, and one of the things I like to do with our students is help them identify different outdated industry norms, different issues going on inside of their space, and really be the person taking a stand against that. And one of the things I'm kind of taking a stand against, there's a few of them, but one of them is the way that niching down has been taught inside of this space and inside of this industry. And I know that there are business coaches and people like that follow me and listen to the podcast, and this may rub you the wrong way. So I will say this is my little bit of a disclaimer. Number one, I don't really care if it rubs you the wrong way. Sorry, hashtag sorry, not sorry, because I take a stand for what I believe in. And I believe that there is something seriously wrong with the way that niching down and how you teach niching, how people teach niching is going on. So I will say this, if the way you teach niching works for you, great. And it helps your students, great. Continue doing it. There's not one right way to do anything, but this is going to be my way, because I think the way that we have been taught to niche down, it does not work for everyone. And it does not work for a mass amount of people inside of this space. And one of the reasons why is because it's becoming oversaturated. This market, the space is becoming way oversaturated. There's more and more content creators, more and more content coming online, more and more course creators coming online. We've never had as many, and you have never had as many competitors as you do right now in this moment. So the reason why I wanted to talk about niching down is because I think there's a couple things going on. Number one, if we focus on the current way of niching, which I'll talk about here in a second, it kind of puts us in a box. And what starts to happen is, because of oversaturation, people go like, well, I need to stand out. And so what they start doing is they start niching down, and they go to a category of a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory until you're into a category where there is no one there. And so what people do by default is they think, because they're not getting traction, because they're not getting any momentum, because they're not getting sales or the attention or the views or whatever it is that they want, they automatically think it's the niche. The niche is oversaturated. Well, I got news for you. It's not the niche. It's how you're communicating within the niche. You haven't figured out how to position yourself with the niche. That's the problem. It's not the niche. It's not whatever you decided. And by the way, side note, as I'm going crazy on a rant, if you think it's called niche, no, it's not. I don't care. It can be pronounced both ways. Get over it. I don't need any comments. I think the last time I talked about niche, I got a good amount of people that were focused on how you pronounce niche. And I'm just like, my mind's blown that's what you decided to take away from the episode last time we did it. So if that's what you're deciding to take away on this episode, just turn it off. You're gonna lose a very valuable lesson. Okay. So again, back to the point is that what happens is when people start to niche down, they get very they go very category, subcategory, because they think that that's how they're going to stand out. And that's a very shortcut way of trying to stand out. And in most cases, it just doesn't work. And so the way that people have been told to niche down is find your category, find your group. And then if that's too broad, then you want to go smaller. So now you're in a smaller category. And then if that's not working, then you want to go into a smaller one and a smaller one. So a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory. And that's how most people look at it. So an example would be this. Your niche would be yoga. I teach yoga. And people are like, oh, that's oversaturated. I'm going to teach yoga to women. Okay, so that's a subcategory of a subcategory. Then they go, oh, well, that's oversaturated. So now people go, well, I'm going to teach yoga to stay-at-home moms instead of just women. So it'd be moms. And then now it's a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory. Like, oh, that's too oversaturated. So then they go, okay, well, I'm going to teach yoga to moms who are in their 30s. And so now we're at a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory. And then that just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper until you're just in an area that, or a niche or an industry or a category that doesn't have a lot of people in it. And then the other problem is you never focused on your messaging. You never focused on your communication in the first place. So now when more and more competitors come in, then it becomes, again, oversaturated and you run into the same exact freaking problem again. And so when we niche down in that way, when we look at our niche as a category, it can run into problems. And in my opinion, I think it's one of the worst ways to niche down because it doesn't actually prepare you or help you figure out how to communicate to people within that niche. All you know is you just want to go into a category. That's it. You don't know who's in that category, how to speak to people in that category, or any of those things. So some of the problems, and I have 5 major problems, are going to happen if you decide to niche down in that way and use that sort of method or philosophy. The first problem is that it really does put you in a box. So what starts to happen is you operate within a box. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to teach yoga to moms. Well, what starts to happen is you go, okay, I'm in this category or this box, and it doesn't allow you to think outside of that box in most cases. Most people go like, okay, what do moms who do yoga? What do they do? What can I teach them? What do they want to learn? All of those things. And that is important. Those are great questions to ask, but it limits you to just those things. Where, maybe there's a great yoga concept that would apply to everyone and moms who want to do yoga. And you're like, well, it doesn't really apply to my niche because it's too broad. And you're like, okay, I'm not going to do it. Well, it could still be very value adding. There could be like a deeper message that you have. And you think, okay, well, I have to communicate within this industry, within this niche. And you don't want to talk about that deeper message or that deeper connection piece. There's also other cases where you're like, well, I want to talk about this one thing, but I can't because that's not my niche. And now I have to switch niches. And it's like, no, you don't. You can make the way I teach it, you can make small little tweaks because you're not stuck in a category. And so, and I'll break down the 3 or actually 4 elements that I use when creating a niche. But when we have 4 different elements that create a niche, we can make small tweaks to each of the element, which makes small alterations to our niche. And we're not limited to a box or a category. Because it is a big deal when if you build a whole brand around a niche that's based off of a category, a subcategory, and then you don't want to do it anymore, and you try to go to a new category, it's a big freaking switch. But it doesn't have to be if we look at it differently. Okay. So the other problem that when we look at a category of a category is that it doesn't give us an understanding of who we're talking to. And to me, that's actually one of the biggest issues going on here is that you just know you are targeting a category. but you haven't thought about the beliefs of the people in that category. You haven't actually thought about the people in that category. You just really figured out a category. You haven't really looked at the problems of the people in that category or the people who are within that category. And you probably haven't even asked yourself, is there someone else that could probably fit into the who I want to talk to and speak to that isn't in this category, because you're so focused on that category. But again, the biggest problem is it doesn't allow you to truly understand, to at least the levels that you need to, who you're going after, because your focus has been more on a category than a person and understanding that person. The next problem is that a lot of the times, and a lot of the complaints that I hear from my students is that they don't feel in alignment with their niche or industry, or they don't like the way of like having to pick a box or a category. They're not in alignment with it because it doesn't integrate their beliefs or their values or their identities or a lot of different things that are them. And sometimes what happens is they pick a category that they themselves don't really want to teach, but they think it's going to be profitable. They themselves pick a category that they think will work, even though it's not where they truly want to be. They pick a category that doesn't really embrace all of who they are. And we have to remember, most of us are running personal brands. There has to be us integrated into that. But if we're going to go into put ourselves into a category and that category doesn't really fully embody who we are, then we're not going to be fully in alignment with that niche that we chose. And so that starts to become a problem as well. And I hear that complaint a lot of times. The next problem that starts to happen is you can sometimes attract the wrong people, like the worst clients, the clients you don't want, because you thought you were forced to go into some sort of category. It wasn't really who you wanted to go after, wasn't really what you wanted to do. So you start to create marketing around it and you just attract the wrong people. It's like not your audience, not your peeps, not the people you vibe with, not the people you want to serve. And you start to attract a lot of the wrong things. And then the last problem that starts to happen that we've noticed, and there's probably more, but the top five, this is the fifth one, is that when we pick a category, a lot of times there are pre-done or predetermined ways or solutions to think about the space. So if I said I was going to be serving stay-at-home moms, teaching them yoga, as soon as we say stay-at-home moms yoga, we already have preconceived notions or beliefs or ways of thinking about how to serve them or what the best method is going to be or who they are. And we don't really fully get to explore who they are or what they're dealing with because we're letting the category fill our mind with preconceived ideas, thoughts, and beliefs about what that category is. So to give you an example, if I was going to use the whole yoga thing, stay-at-home moms teaching yoga, we already have preconceived ideas of how we would teach the yoga, who that person is going to be. As soon as we hear stay-at-home mom, we're also going to think of we're already going to have preconceived notions of what their ideas are beliefs are and things like that. And the way I teach niching is a little bit different. And we don't actually want those preconceived notions that stem from a category. And again, those preconceived notions and ideas, they can be beneficial, but a lot of times they also kind of put you in a box. But what I like to do is when we start to create our niche that we're going to go after, I like to feel free and open and not be limited or influenced by preconceived notions of who my person is. So here's the 4 things that you need, in my opinion, to really figure out your niche. Number 1, the first and foremost, is we have to figure out we have to figure out our skills and knowledge. Like, what is it that we are very good at? What are our skills? What's our knowledge? And what parts of that skills and knowledge do we want to really embrace? So again, it starts with you. It doesn't start with a category. It literally starts with you. And what we start to do is we look at who are you? What are your skills and knowledge? What is the thing that you want to teach? And then the very next question is, what problems do I want to solve with those skills and knowledge? Now, this is also going to be the very first part of your messaging. So that's why I love this process, because when we start to try to understand what problems we solve, that's going to be the foundation of your messaging, but it also becomes the foundation of your niche. So instead of saying, I serve this category, we start to say, I serve people with these problems. What happens is your niche becomes people that have the problems that you want to solve. It makes you totally in alignment. It makes you happy to serve people. You don't feel confined by a box. You don't have preconceived notions or ideas of what you should be talking about because you're in a certain category now. There is no category. It's pure freedom. You make the choice of what problems you want to solve. And your niche, quite literally, becomes people with those problems. That's it. Okay. Now, that's not it, but that's the very first step, but that's the majority of it. The very next step is we want to figure out the identities of those people. And again, it's coming down to you. What do you, or who do you want to serve? Your choice. It's up to you. So identity would be something that the person would say, I am, and then blank. So for me, some of my identities are, I am an entrepreneur, I am a husband, I am a father. Those are some of my strongest and biggest identities, right? So you get to ask yourself, who do I want to serve, and who would they say they are? So this could be as simple as they are a human. If you want to be very broad, it could be, I am a mom, I am a dad, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a lawyer, I am a yogi, I am an endurance athlete, I am a mindful person, like whatever they would say they are. What is their identity? You get to choose. Now, the beautiful part about this is that when we start to use problems and identity, we start to attract exactly who we want to work with based off their identity. And we get to choose what problems we want to solve. It's like absolute bliss. This is like how we finally figure out how to start attracting the right person. And a lot of the reasons why we can't attract right people is because we think we have to be in a category or subcategory of something, and we don't. So now what happens is our niche now becomes people with these problems that have these identities. So again, if I can solve the problem of low engagement on content. So that's one of the things I can do. If your content's not getting engagement, I can help you with that problem. That's a problem I solve. That's my niche. Like my niche is people that literally have like a lot of value to add into the world, put it out there, and they can't get seen, heard, or any sales. They have no momentum. That's the problem I chose myself to solve. So then I get to choose like, okay, well, there's a lot of people with that problem. What type of person do I want to work with? And for me, that's course creators and service providers and program owners. So now I know for a fact that I don't serve like e-com or local business that much, or like physical products or, things like that. So now my niche is not like teaching message. I don't view it as teaching messaging to course creators. My niche is people that are course creators and have a lot of value to add and can't get any traction. So that becomes my niche. That's my niche. I'm not put into a box, and I get to choose who I want to work with. I create my own niche based off of those things. The next thing is values. What values do you want them to have? Do you want them to be someone who works hard? Do you want them to be full of integrity? Do you want them to value family? What are their values? And usually values and identities will be kind of linked together. So like one of my top values is family, and one of my top identities is husband and father. One of my biggest values also is success and money. And one of my top identities is entrepreneur and business owner. So the identities and the values will kind of go hand in hand. Okay. And those three things will make up most of your niche. Now, there is a fourth category that you can go into if you want to, but you don't really have to. This one would be beliefs. This would be people that have the same beliefs as you do around business or whatever it is you do. I'm not sold either way on this. If you want to do it, great. If you don't want to do it, that's totally fine. But a belief would be something along the lines of like, for me, for example, I think college is one of the worst things you can do to an 18-year-old who doesn't know what they want to do in life. I think it's like one of the worst things you can absolutely do is put them 100K in debt when they don't know what they want to do and make them choose something that they want to do for the rest of their life. I also think that kids should be taught entrepreneurship just as much as they are college. And so if I really wanted to, I could say my niche is people with this problem that are the engagement problem that are course creators, that have a value of success and also believe that entrepreneurship should be taught to kids. That now becomes my niche. Now, what's great about that is when I start to talk about those 4 things, guess what? That's exactly who I start to attract in my brand. And I start to attract dream clients because I decided to niche down a little bit differently than choosing a category. Now, let's go back to that comment that I said earlier. When I said, if you choose to niche down by choosing a category, you're going to run into problems because if you ever want to switch, you literally have to switch categories, which changes everything. Now, when you look at the way that I am teaching you to niche down, if you want to make switches, you can make small switches and it's not anything drastic, meaning that you're like, you know what? I want to change my niche a little bit or attract different people. I'm going to switch up the identity. Like, great, go ahead and switch up the identity, but you still are serving the same problem and you still have the same values and you still have the same beliefs. Or if you're like, I want to serve a different problem now, that's fine. You can start attracting and using a different problem, but you can still have the same identity, the same values, the same beliefs still in there. So you're not making drastic changes to your niche when you niche down this way. But when you want to switch a category, it's a pretty big deal. That's like a full on pivot. And, if you niche down my way, it doesn't mean you're not going to do a pivot, but it just gives you more flexibility for smaller changes if you really want to go that route. So again, niching down doesn't have to be this high pressure, complicated thing where you literally have to choose a category. In fact, you don't have to choose a category at all. You just have to choose what problems I want to serve. What are the identities of the people that have those problems? And what are the identities of the people I want to serve? What are their values? And that's really it. And if you want to add the third one in there, you just start to choose their beliefs. And what happens is this becomes your North Star. This becomes where we focus on when it comes to messaging. We're not trapped into a box. We have the freedom to expand and to change and to adjust. It's more fluid. It's just a much more, in my opinion, effective way to be able to niche down, to make you feel in alignment with who you're working with and who you're attracting. So this is a little bit of a shorter episode, but we are going to go ahead and wrap up here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. And if you did, please leave me a review on iTunes. And I would love to hear your comments on this episode. So if you want to share this episode and tag me in it, share your thoughts or send me a DM or a comment on YouTube, please do so. I always love reading those comments. And thanks for listening. I'll see you guys all on another episode. Take care.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.